Showtime.
And we're live. Perfect entrance, Ben. Thank you. Showtime. Everybody, welcome to the Love First Christians Bible study. I'm here with Ben Williams and Aaron Goss, both who I've already asked how they're doing today, but I'm going to pretend I haven't. Ben, how are you doing today?
You know what? I am doing very well today. And I'm good looking too, so what can I say?
You can't hate that, man. I do like it. Three handsome gents here. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, we got a lot to cover because we missed, last week, and I apologize. Things just kind of got busy. I feel bad missing these things, but it's not like a podcast. You know what I mean? We do this for anybody who wants to join. If you want to join, there is a link in the description of this video, and we'd love to have you, Christian or not. We would appreciate having you. We actually really could use a lot of those perspectives for some of the things we're doing right now. So if you want to join in, feel free to do that. That said, I'll go ahead. We got a lot to cover because, like I said, missed week. I don't want to just skip the Bible stuff that got skipped, especially if there's any questions. Aaron, let's start with you. What do you want to talk about from the reading this week?
Yeah, so I had a question in regards to one of Jesus's comments. I think this is going to be Luke chapter 22, verse 36.
Okay.
Might be 21:36. But he says, "But now," he said, "take your money and a traveler's bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." He was counted amongst, for the time has come for this prophecy to be fulfilled. He was counted among the rebels. Yet everything was written about me by the prophets will come true. "Look, Lord," they replied, "we have 2 swords among us. That's enough," he said. And then, as we go to find out in the future, the only time one of them actually uses a sword, he's reprimanded for it, and his actions have been undone as a result. So my question is, why does Jesus tell him to buy the swords?
This is an excellent question, and perhaps one of my favorite to actually answer. Let me go ahead and I'm going to add something to the screen here. If I had a less direct answer, I would give, how do I add this? How do I add you? I see it. I just want to show it. Show it. There we go. There it is. Yeah. So this one here that we're talking about here, Jesus talking about, and I actually listed this as something I wanted to talk about actually just a few verses earlier, saying Satan's asked to sift you all like wheat. And he's going to, but I intervene for you that your faith might not fail. And we're told very directly that Peter may actually lose his faith were it not for the intervention of Christ on his behalf. That not only did Jesus have to intervene, but that the others would also fall apart if Peter had not stayed strong and his faith been lost. So we're dealing with something that is the context of this is really important because we're dealing with somebody who is basically on the verge of losing his faith. And
actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before you get fully invested in that, I didn't even think about what you just said when I was reading it. And now that you say that, I can't. The immediate question is, if the disciples who were traveling around with Jesus and witnessing all of his miracles and being there for all of his teachings are having such a crisis of faith that they're having to have direct divine intervention to keep them from losing their faith, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. So what's happening here is that Jesus is asking, I mean, this is really a humility check, right? That they're so scared for their lives that which honestly should be very relatable. Let's be level here. I think a lot of us, we want to pretend our faith is bigger than that. But with a gun in our face and a request to reject God, that we might, right? That this is just, the disciples might. This isn't a matter of them not believing. It's fear, right? And so that out of that fear, and actually for Peter's case specifically with denying Christ, shame. That he would be so ashamed to return after denying Christ that he would just be like, you know what, I'm just going to be done with the whole movement, the faith and all that. I denied Christ. I feel awful and I don't want to go back. And we kind of need to think about that, how much shame we endure that keeps us from doing things that we want to do just because we're unwilling to make amends. to go in front of people and be like, man, I just denied Christ, or I just lied, I just said that. How many of us can approach a spouse? Most of us lie at some point to people we love. I mean, you pretty much only lie to people you love, unless you're like a psychopath. You only need to lie to people you care about, whose opinion matters to you. And so most of us will do that at some point. And for us to have that healthy relationship, we need to be able to swallow it and say like, hey, I lied really bad. Right. And I feel bad. I submit myself. I want to atone for it. I want us to have a close relationship again. Now, we should know that most people do this, right? That the disciples, Peter included, is willing to deny Christ, lie, whatever, because he's scared for his life, right? Like that's something that we should be able to relate to him for. Usually when we lie, it's not exactly this intense, but we all at least should be able to relate to this. If a minor amount of heat makes us liars, that Peter looking at a major amount of heat will make him deny Christ and then be so afraid to face his fellow man afterwards. So that's kind of the context going into this. But then when we talk about this, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and go out and buy one. And he was numbered with the transgressors. I tell you, this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment. And so that this is the idea that Jesus is going to go out and that he is going to have an armed force, right? This is something that the Israelites believed, right? That he will have enough. And then they're like, oh, we've got 2 swords. And Jesus is telling them, yeah, that's enough, right? Because like it's fulfilling the thing technically that I've got some kind of army at my back here, right? Like, but I mean, obviously we're not going to use it. And in fact, you correctly note that Peter is condemned when using the sword. And that this is something that they're not supposed to do. And so what we have here is a commandment to do 2 things as Christians. We're supposed to be aware of the damage we can do. I'm going to go on a little tangent, and I promise Ben and Aaron, I'll give you guys all the time you want for your own tangents on this, because I'm aware this is long, but Leonardo the Ninja Turtle is given katana blades, and he, of all the 3 turtles, is the only one that's giving a weapon that's specific meaning is to kill somebody. And now, Sai were meant to disarm, nunchuck, again, disarmament and bashing, knocking somebody out. The bow, again, disarmament, keeping somebody away. And Leonardo's given these katana because he is supposed to be aware that within you at all times is the power to do something extremely destructive. And you need to be aware of that. In fact, you need to have it on your person. You need to be able to say like, hey, I know myself well enough to know that I could kill somebody. And that's something that every Christian should know. It's very easy to kill somebody, right? Like, and we need to be aware that we have that power. And we also, while we need to be aware that we have the power to kill somebody, this is the reason Leonardo gets them, is the understanding of how to wield that power and how to set it down, right? And so what this is it's like you need to be armed and you need to disarm every time. You need to go around with armaments. This isn't the only time that Christ asks his disciples to be armed. And you need to also not use those armaments. Again, this is something that's reiterated more than in just this passage within the scriptures, that you need to also disarm. So while you might be reading this and think, well, I just won't arm at all. Like that's, that just seems like the easier thing to do. It's not the point. It's never to not be dangerous. You're always going to be dangerous, even if with your bare hands and you're just a guy. There's somebody you can strangle. You can drown a baby in the bathtub. Even the weakest person can do that. You have always had the power to kill and destroy and take life. And Jesus wants people to see. He wants Christians to show up with arms and not use them. To be like, I could resort to this, but I'm not going to. And I think there's a beautiful sentiment in here that we see that when we say like, yes, I have a gun and I'm not going to use this gun because it's just not my way of life. I have the ability, but I'm not going to use it. Ben, any thoughts you have about this one?
Well, I think you're onto something there. And I actually, it's so funny. See, I come from a background of, we're, Bible thumping, gun toting, constitutional loving Christians. And so as a recovering Christian nationalist, I can't help but think of the Second Amendment aspect of life. And I grew up surrounded by guns. And, you know, I couldn't wait till I was 18 so I could carry a weapon so I could defend myself. And I noticed that when I started carrying, my first weapon I carried was a Smith and Wesson 357 Magnum. And I noticed that when I started carrying that weapon at 18, that I looked for trouble. And I all of a sudden my perspective changed and I looked for trouble. And I constantly looked for problems to arise. And I constantly was on condition yellow, ready to jump to condition red at a moment's notice. And I noticed that one, and I'm not saying it's wrong to carry a weapon because you can, we do. There are times when you can save the life of many, but unfortunately, there's many situations where someone carries a weapon and they use it foolishly, and they end up causing more harm than good. And I've noticed that since, for the most, I'd say 99.99% of the time, I don't carry a weapon anymore. And I find that when I don't carry a weapon, that I don't look for trouble. I look for solutions instead. I look for de-escalation, and instead of being a hothead, I tend to want to give a soft answer. And I'm willing to give my life to try to save another, but I'm a lot less willing to try to take a life to save another. And it's taken a journey for me to get to that point. And so I grew up where this very passage of scripture was used to teach how, as responsible Christians, we should be carrying guns and being ready to defend, and to defend the weak and defend the helpless and to stop the bad guy. Instead of thinking about the fact that, well, remember when they traveled up and down the roads, they dealt with wild animals, wolf packs and lions and dog packs, and it was dangerous. And they didn't we don't have that in our particular area. But yet you go out west or you go up in Alaska, you won't see anybody without a gun because of, polar bears and grizzlies. And it's the guns aren't for people. The guns are because of the danger of living where you're on the bottom of the food chain in the area you're in. I think that I think the key here, and I think it goes along with what you were saying, the key is the word moderation. Throughout scripture, every time I see what did Jesus say? Okay, two is enough. You're exactly right. It's not about flaunting our weapons. It's not about showing. I mean, let me show up like the Crusades with an army ready to kill everybody if you don't say Jesus loves you, and you don't follow the path of Jesus. And by the way, if you don't, we're going to annihilate you and kill you all. And all of a sudden, everyone just starts saying, "Oh, we love Jesus," and suddenly there's thousands of people converted to um, Judeo Christianity. Well, they were scared to death because they knew if they didn't, they were going to die. And so how is it that we can suddenly say that we're going to be representatives of the gospel of Jesus Christ when we're toting guns around and we're toting all of our weaponry around, when it's all about, I am willing to take a life, I'm willing to take a life, instead of being, I'm willing to give my life. And I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm starting to wander here, but I hope I'm making my point. So.
No, I love it. And Aaron, I will let you talk, but Bray actually said something that kind of touches on your point here. By the way, Bray says, "Hey," so we say, "Hey, what's up, Bray?" Bray says, "To me, this passage is about being prepared to counter natural dangers or even provide for the defense of another." That's something you touched on, Ben.
Yeah.
Whereas the Sons of Thunder who answered Jesus were asking if they should be gathering weapons for a zealot rebellion. So yeah, self-defense or defending another, even if you don't believe in defending the self, having a sword to defend somebody else. That's tough because obviously then they actually use their sword to defend somebody else and they're condemned for doing so. I also want to say this to those who really don't want to own guns. Please note that the rationale Jesus is giving is because that's what's written to make the scriptures come true. You don't need to have a gun or a sword on you to make this scripture come true. It has already come true. Right.
Bingo.
Like, and so that is something that if you aren't a big gun carrier, or even if you are, you can't really use this particular passage to defend your carrying of a gun, because Jesus says specifically why, because it check marks a prophecy, right? And like that prophecy no longer, it's already been fulfilled. You don't need to still have one today. Aaron, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I got two thoughts. First, I want to kind of echo what Ben said in regards to his upbringing of being raised, in the Bible thumping, gun toting sort of mindset. I've always got a YouTube video for everything, and I just dropped a YouTube link in the members chat of a really good video about the mentality that goes into constantly feeling as though you're in danger. This video specifically a kind of satirical take on the Home Alone franchise, but it's mostly about the idea of constantly feeling like your home is in threat and you have to be prepared to defend your home from armed intruders coming in at all times, and the fantasies that get involved, like wrapped up in that, of the desire to kill people who are invading your homestead or whatever, when statistically it's an incredibly rare event that does not happen to, especially in the suburbs where it's like the most common. Like the suburbs are incredibly safe comparatively speaking, but that seems to breed the most mentality of like this fantasy of, I can't wait for somebody to come in here and I'm going to kill him. I'm going to set the Roomba, set the Alexa up to like play Welcome to the Jungle and, get that whole mentality and everything like that. But, also going back to this actual verses and everything, I guess the fact that you addressed the fact that this was a prophecy that he had to check off and is not applicable to today. I'm thinking about verses like "Blessed are the meek," and the meek shall inherit the earth. Yeah, that when you're slapped, you turn the other cheek to.
Yep.
Yeah, you, rather than pulling out your sword and defending yourself immediately to killing the person. Yeah.
What I'm trying to remember the verse, but remember Jesus said, "Those who live by the sword will die by the sword."
Yeah.
And look at King David. He was a man that lived by the sword and died by the sword. And yes, he was considered this mighty man of valor. When I was a young buck, I used to love to read about all the mighty men, and how mighty and tough and awesome they were. But it came with a price. David didn't get to do his dream of building the temple. He lost that privilege because he was a man that lived by the sword. I don't know, something to ponder.
Yeah, it's certainly not supposed to be a lifestyle point. The Kingdom of God is Within You by Leo Tolstoy. If I had to recommend like 3 books to any Christian, it'd probably be one of them. Huge case for pacifism within it. I consider myself a very strong pacifist, with the only exception, and this is after a lot of talking with you, Aaron, my only exception being if the Holy Spirit commits you otherwise, tells you that it's time to make an exception to the rule. But all those verses you say about being meek, right? All that, absolutely. In fact, as I said, the way I reconcile this verse with the rest is that you're not supposed to use it, right? Like the armed don't use it, right? So that's not the kind of army they're going for. And as Bray says, like, are we preparing? What kind of rebellion are we preparing to do? Violent one or peaceful? And I think kind of the jury's out on that. As far as, well, there's evidence both ways, but generally speaking, peaceful revolutions are a good, positive way to go. Ben, do you have any reading that you want to discuss?
Not really. I've had a crazy couple weeks.
Do you want me to out you? Do you want to talk about your crazy?
Well,
couple
it's like
weeks?
one of them is I got married.
You had a pretty major life event, yeah.
I never dreamed I'd get the privilege of getting married again. But she's watching, by the way, I believe on Facebook right now.
Oh my gosh!
My wife.
Hello.
Yeah, her name was Alicia, and then I decided I have a lot of health problems, so
Mhm.
I can't do a lot of exertion, but because we're struggling uh, to survive financially with groceries and stuff, where she's disabled, I'm disabled. She has cystic fibrosis, and then I have long COVID issues, and so we decided to put in a garden. So I've been really working hard, and we put a pretty big garden in, but it really overstimulated my body. In fact, it's already happened to me multiple times here in the last few minutes. If you see me suddenly just like twitching my head, I get these brain zaps, and it's an electrical current that shoots through my head, and I lose equilibrium for a second, and all of a sudden I can't remember what I was saying. So if I do it, don't worry, I'm not spazzing out on drugs or anything. I'm having a brain zap. Uh, it's all from COVID. COVID did this to me. Brain, but I'm overstimulated because I've worked so hard on the garden. So I've been physically wiped out like you wouldn't believe. I haven't been able to read or anything. I haven't even been able to enjoy a computer game, and that's just horrible. I mean, like seriously. But
Terrible.
exactly. See,
It sounds like a nightmare. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you're a Hitman 3 guy too, right? I mean, that's one of my
I just
favorite
downloaded
games.
Hitman 3 again.
Did
I
you?
decided to start it up again.
It's on my top 10 list. I actually displayed my top 10 list
I
last
just
year.
downloaded it again today. It's like I gotta get back on that.
Yeah.
Boy,
Good stuff.
howdy. Yesterday I carrying in groceries. And of course, you know, the typical man thing to do when you're doing groceries is to gather up 2 or 3 bags in each hand and carry them in and make 15 trips or so, right? No, it's of course it's to grab as many bags as you possibly can,
Absolutely.
like eight bags in each hand. So I'm doing that, right? Carry that first load in. Go back outside, and there's a case of water and like a 32-pound bag of cat food. And I'm like, well, I can't carry the cat food on top of the water because it's too unwieldy. So I put the cat food on top of my head and balance it on my head, like roughly in the center and so. And then I grab the case of water and I'm making my way up the ramp. And everything's fine until I get to the top of the ramp, set the water down, and then all of a sudden I get this horrible cramp in my leg. Like my body's like, okay, you're getting a little too old to be doing this, because it's probably like 70 or 80 pounds of combined weight, and that's more than I usually lift. You know, I'm not like going to the gym or anything. And so my body is not capable of doing that easily.
Yeah, I was bedridden after COVID. I was bedridden for 2 years, and I'm just now really starting to get back on my feet again. Like I can go for a walk now without collapsing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's actually relatively in the last 12 months or so, I've been able to actually start walking and stuff again. So,
Right
oh,
on.
my wife just said hello, gentlemen.
Hey,
There
hi,
she is.
Alicia.
There we go. Hey, sweetheart.
It's good
Hey,
to see you.
and if she ever wants to join, she is welcome to join.
I don't think we'll ever get to that point, but I know that
Okay.
she and my mother-in-law, they have really enjoyed our Bible studies.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, open invitation to either join the Love First Christians,
Absolutely.
whatever. But if you just want to root on your man, believe me, there are plenty of groups I don't join, but I tune in occasionally to support the people I like in my life. So that is totally cool. I mean, I can't get my gal on these things, so that's how little pressure there is. I want to, but what can
maybe one day we'll have a couples show or something.
That would be fantastic.
Wouldn't it be cool?
Jamie would hate it. She hates being public.
My wife's the same way.
It's so weird because she's got such strong opinions. I'm like, these are great opinions. Like, it's like,
right.
No, I want to have them, but just in private. Aaron, you feel me?
No, I get you.
Okay.
Yeah. May I throw in another one?
Sure.
So I got two points that are kind of just esoteric, and I'd love to cover them, but if for time purposes, if we don't have the time, I don't mind skipping over them. The other one that I really wanted to talk about was the scene in front of Pilate. The trial of Jesus and everything like that. I wrote down chapter 23, verse 23. And Specifically, it's in regards to the mob. Pilate repeatedly saying, "This guy's done nothing wrong. Why are we trying to sentence him to death? It makes no sense." And the mob just constantly yelling louder and louder that they want his death. And something that just occurred to me now that I didn't think about prior to reading it this time is, why isn't Jesus like almost universally beloved by the people? And so why is the mob against him? Because you would think you got the church elders and like the Pharisees and everything like that. They're powerful institution of the church against him. But like, he's everywhere he goes, he's got massive throngs of people listening to his parables and asking him for miracles. You would think he'd be like universally beloved among the people. So where is this mob coming from?
This is a great question, and I think I've told you before. If I were to write my like a college dissertation on something, I would have a tough time avoiding this exact subject. The trial of Jesus is such a mix of politics and religion, and it's so fascinating to see how Jesus handles it. And like, his
that's one of the more esoteric points is actually about that specific subject that I wanted to ask about. But
so Jesus, before this, I can answer your question very quickly. The Pharisees and Sadducees gathered together along with various leaders and tax collectors and whatnot like that, people that Jesus had been hard on. This is why he was ambushed in Gethsemane by this same mob, right? Well, you think, where are all the people that love Jesus? Well, they had to get him when he was in private, right? Because if he was in public, the people would turn against him. This mob is entirely comprised of Jewish leadership that Jesus has called out for being thieves, the people at the temple where he exposed their thievery, Roman loyalists, and as well as Pharisees and Sadducees. And after being humiliated, and it's funny because those three groups have very little in common with each other, by the way. We oftentimes as Christians throw Pharisees, Sadducees into the same thing. They are not. In fact, very critical differences with each other, but they put it all aside for Jesus because that's something that they can universally get together on, is disliking this guy who's exposing their corruption, essentially. So when they rush him off, and you'll see this, they rush him off to Herod, they rush him off to Pilate. They want to do this before everybody wakes up. They want to get him on that cross before the world wakes up to what they're doing. They bust him at midnight.
See, I didn't realize that. Like, I realized that you had the really late arrest, and I remember him saying specifically, you're arresting me here in this what is it, garden? Because you know full well that if you did it at the temple, that you would be resisted.
Yep.
But I didn't realize that all of the trial that took place, like all of that took place in the same evening. I assumed it was like the next day. Like, why would is it sort of like a judge issuing an arrest warrant like in the middle of the night, like on an emergency basis or something like that?
Right.
Like why would the Jewish officials have so much sway with Pilate and then Herod? So one of the esoteric points that I had is I didn't realize that Herod was involved at all. Is Luke the only one that actually brings up this transfer of authority?
I am not sure.
I don't remember reading it in the others. Because he literally gets transferred over to Herod because Pilate's like, I don't have to deal with this. I'm going to get rid of him, send him over here, so I don't have to be involved. And then Herod's like, yeah, no, okay, I'm going to send it back to Pilate. And it's like, because the reason I'm asking is, even considering the fact that everybody's asleep, I mean, you've got situations now in our world where ICE comes and does like a midnight raid on a farm or something like that, and word travels so fast in the middle of the night that you've got people, up in arms, and they're like coming in to interfere with the arrests and everything like that in the middle of the night. And granted, you have the internet, and that makes it easier.
Sure.
But you also have a much tighter knit community at the time.
Yeah.
That you would think that like the arrest happens, and a handful of people are out and about when they see Jesus get arrested, and they start spreading it to the people's homes.
Yeah.
And you've got a crowd of people like a mob forming, to rescue Jesus. Like, you would think that would happen. And the reason I assume it doesn't is because this is the way that the story is supposed to go. Like, there's some sort of divine providence taking place here, where, things are steering in the direction that God wants them to go.
Sure.
I think it also has to. There's the comparisons between what is currently going on and what happened then. It's the religious leaders and the power of religious leaders and how they can sway entire nations to their bidding. And it's the comparisons between what happened with Jesus and what's happening literally right now in real time is just uncanny.
We have
Wow.
I think we mentioned it several times, but Hody and I have a book club that we go to. I run it, but it's kind of our book club on Thursday evenings, and I just added a book that I really want us to consider reading in the future. It's called One Nation Under God by Kevin Kruse, and it's all about how after the New Deal and everything like that, and the fact that the New Deal was pushed as a Christ-like position of Christians need to be charitable. There was a major backlash by the conservative movement, and they're like, okay, if we're going to reseize power, we desperately need to figure out a way to counter message the idea that we need to be charitable and Christian and everything like that. And what they ended up doing was partnering with ministers to get out the message that Christians and conservatism are intertwined completely, and that it's basically a long chain of where we get to today, where Elon Musk is going out and saying that empathy is the fundamental weakness of Western civilization, and you've got pastors that are saying like that in regards to that Catholic priest woman that saying that was she Catholic? I don't remember. The woman priest who was talking about empathy and that we needed to have mercy on immigrants. And there was a major Christian pastor who was like, do not commit the sin of empathy.
I've actually read multiple articles recently written by guys that are avidly pro-Trump that are also avid Christians, professing Christians. And some of these guys I respect because they have some incredible writings. But that's what they're doing. They're actually calling out that there's this sin of empathy going on. And I'm like, I didn't know empathy was a sin, but apparently it is now.
Yeah, Marion Budd is Episcopalian, but understandable to confuse that with Catholics for obvious reasons. Yeah, it's so to answer a lot of this, and I don't think I even need to necessarily drone on for too long. So Pilate's job in this region as governor is to keep everything safe and steady. To give you a brief history, between Malachi and Matthew, Alexander the Great takes over most of what they call the known world at the time, right, for the Greeks. Now, the thing is they knew that they could rule by military, right? But every time you take a new territory, when you leave that territory and you take your military, they see no reason to keep pay. Did you really take over, right? Like they're just like, I think I'm just going to go back to what we were doing.
His job was to keep things stable,
right? The Greeks realizing that they are losing these territories, sell it to the Romans. So this is why the Bible is spoken in Greek, the New Testament, but they are under Roman occupation. Or Roman rule. And I actually don't even want to say occupation, because the point of the Romans, and this is rather ingenious of them, they buy these territories from Greece so that way they don't have to go to war with Greece. They buy it from them flat out. And Greece saying we're going to lose them anyway, hey, might as well get something for it. So it gives them to Rome for cheap. And what Rome does is installs these governors They will send a military force if they have to. Rome is famous for their roads, obviously, that still span to this day to these kind of territories. So that way they can get there quickly if they have to. But they don't need to keep the army there, especially if everything is steady. So what is the one thing that they need? They need their money from this region. One of the things you notice, I actually have a cool book that talks about the currency and what happened during this time, is they went from their own currency being imprinted with Herod to silver, which was the Roman currency, and that was still imprinted with Herod, right? Like, still, hey, you're in charge, you're the boss. We're just changing that stupid material, right, that you're using, And so that way, all the transactions are being done in Roman currency, and all they need to do is collect taxes. Now, why does this matter for this time period? Because Pilate's sole job is to make it seem like Herod's in charge. This is why he sends him to Herod, right? Like, I want it to be your decision. Right? I'm so awesome. I'm letting you rule yourselves. This is why Pilate washes his hands of it, right? You guys are the leaders. I'm going to let you guys decide. Now, it should be noteworthy that this does not work out for Pilate. Jesus notes he's an impossible situation. But what he's trying to do is keep everything calm. Pilate's job is to just keep things calm, keep business flowing. Right now, Pilate could be like, hey, I need the military to squash these guys, right? Like, and that is something that the Romans did have to execute, obviously, from time to time. They aren't known in this time as being a peaceful people, but generally speaking, they didn't have to do this. It was always the threat of violence more so than the actual violence itself. And so Pilate's job is he doesn't want Rome to come in here because, of course, costs money, that costs resources. His job is to make it look like, hey, you guys are in charge. I'm just here collecting a couple things. Don't worry about me. I want to keep everything calm. So what Pilate's up against here is he's got Jesus and basically everybody in the population in one camp. And then he's got all the leadership that can actually destroy the infrastructure on the other hand. So it's no surprise that Pilate has to side with this leadership, right? With the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the tax collectors and whatnot, because without their support, he's really in a lot of trouble, especially because some of the people most inspired by Jesus were zealots themselves. Pilate had actually just finished, as we read a few chapters ago. I believe we actually covered this last time's reading. Pilate had actually executed several zealots already. So this is not something that he was, he didn't really love the Jesus camp. And he doesn't seem to love Jesus, although sometimes he comes off that way. Obviously he's married to a Jewish person. That's been noted as well. But as we all know, you do that to be like, oh, he's one of us, right? To keep people calm and everything. He doesn't love these peoples. He's there to try and appease Rome. So this is why, essentially he sides with them over everything else, is that he's aware that even though that this is a coup they're pulling, Pilate calls them out on it correctly, right? Like, you guys are messing with the law. They're saying that Jesus is committing, it's not sedition. There you go. Attempt to usurp the throne, right? And this is in no way sedition, right? Like, Jesus is not a threat to Caesar's throne. This is why he asks, where's your kingdom? And he's like, it's not in this world. And then he's like, okay, he's claiming he's a king of heaven, right? Like, he's not saying he's king of Rome. Everybody listen to me. He's saying he's king of heaven. And so he's aware. That's why he asked this question, is they're being manipulative to try and find a technicality in which case Rome will execute him. What Pilate does is say, I'm going to let you guys do what you want with him. And that way you can say it was your decision. I just oversaw the process, and even then he doesn't even want credit for that. He puts up King of the Jews, much to their detriment on there, because, and I actually just looked this up for you, Aaron, it's somewhere between 3 and 9 hours, it looks like, that between his arrest and his crucifixion. It's quick. It's fast. And so it's, unfortunately it's not fast enough. Pilate delays, right? Sends him to Herod, tries his best to make it so that Jesus can't be executed, because he doesn't, he's aware that this is like a coup. This is something that they're trying to pull off. And the people would keep them in check. But these people are pushing it. They want this done immediately. And so it's like waking up and finding out he's dead, and so they find out he's being crucified at the time they wake up, which is a huge disaster for the Pharisees. They wanted this to be over quick. They wanted him to be dead that night, right? Instead of in the morning when people are waking up. I think I'm going in probably too much detail.
Well,
but,
and actually, another question is, and I realize that this could just be, the answer could just be because of the story that God wanted to tell. He created, things flowed the way they did as a result of God's actions. But
yeah,
John, I think it was John, cuts off the ear of the person trying to arrest Jesus, and they've only got 2 swords between them, and they've got an entire army basically showing up to arrest Jesus. Why didn't the people that want Jesus dead just cut them all down right then and there? Because they struck first,
Yeah, they want it to be, so they in turn want it to be Rome's decision, right? This is because they could just kill Jesus and all his followers. You're absolutely correct. But then would Rome, in fact, I believe Pilate would almost assuredly, to appease the people, kill them in turn. Right? Because they'd be like, oh, you just killed, an innocent man. There was no trial. You're supposed to come to me through these things, that big on-off switch as far as his authority, right? He just then turns it back on. And it's like, you didn't have the authority to kill an innocent person. You just killed somebody and a bunch of innocent people that people liked, because that would create a bunch of riots, right? And so they want it to be Rome's decision, because if it's their decision, they lose the people,
Yeah,
Rome,
that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, Rome and the Pharisees end up both losing the people because Christianity's awesome like that. Bray says Pilate didn't understand because he didn't see Jewish law as authoritative, if he bothered knowing it at all. The multitudes understood the law, saw its fulfillment in Jesus. The Sanhedrin, this is their leadership, were radicalized because his coming challenged their authority. Bray also makes this note here. We all know who Rome's like, we all know who the captain is. The Sanhedrin's like, yeah, it's me, right? Rome. Of course. Sure. Having puppet states. Any Ben, I talked a lot. Any thoughts about this before we move on?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay. I did have a couple. Man, I'm scrolling back through, and there's a lot of stuff that I'd really like to talk about. But this is the problem with falling behind, is I got to pick like my favorites of my favorites to talk about. So Ben, you had a really good post in the Love First Christians about Good Friday. I know that kind of touched your heart a little bit. Did you want to share any of that? Here's some of the thoughts that you had just about it, since it came up in the reading, as well as just it being an event that happened, after our last book club.
Right, it did come up in the reading. Oh my, I have to pull it back up. Me and my memory.
You're okay. Here, let's see if I can even get you a link here. I mean, I can even just read what you said, but I just figured.
Why don't you read it while I'm pulling it up?
So it says, today much of Christianity observes Good Friday, a day within the Easter weekend. During this time, evangelical Christianity invests considerable resources in commemorating the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Yet the ultimate outcome of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross seems to be profoundly overlooked. What was the intended result? The answer, though plainly visible, is often missed. Jesus came to redeem and restore all of humanity, offering a divine love that transcends the barriers of race and gender. We are taught that the cross allows direct access to God, eliminating the need for intermediaries. We are told that in Christ, distinctions of gender, race, and ethnicity dissolve. We become unified. And so we arrive at a weekend where a pagan festival and a sacred observance are interwoven, celebrated as paramount within evangelical Christianity. This is the same evangelical Christianity that often applauds the suffering of those deemed illegal immigrants or unwanted homeless. The same evangelical Christianity that proudly dons the red hat emblazoned with MAGA, a symbol of division. This is the same evangelical Christianity that has cheered on the atrocities committed against the Palestinian people. The same evangelical Christianity that idolizes a man who embodies malice and incites violence against dissenters, a man who has transformed Christian nationalism into a false idol, worshipped above Jesus and his teachings. The Easter celebrated by evangelical Christianity has become hollow. I refuse to partake in a celebration devoid of meaning. Instead, I will seek out the company of the broken and suffering, for that is where the true spirit of Jesus resides.
Man, I forgot I posted that.
Good stuff, man.
Well, you see, it sounds so much better when it comes out of Hodie's mouth.
When Hodie reads it, makes it just sounds so much better.
Don't all our words sound better coming out of somebody else? Nobody likes to sound
Yes.
their own voice, man. I'm myself included. I know you basically probably said everything that you wanted to say there, but I just know that for me, I felt a lot of it. Obviously, Easter weekend's always big. It really kind of hit me profoundly this year. This was kind of my first Easter. I guess we were there with the Love First Christians last year, but the first time that we really kind of coalesced as in the current group that we currently have. And it just really, I think the nature of Good Friday and the recognition, the humility of Christ, of submitting himself, doing something that we know he didn't want to do, right, for the sake of our salvation.
Yeah.
And that contrast that humility with the abject pride of the people who celebrate it today. You know, not just, I mean, Trump, obviously, politicians, very prideful. But I think specifically the evangelical Christians, you know, 74% of whom still, by the way, only demographic with which Trump has not lost support is white evangelical Christians. Yes. Still enjoys 74% support among white evangelical Christians. Like that level of pride, that lack of humility, right? Like an obvious, like unwillingness to submit even to the needs of other people, or like the goodness to other people feels like oppression to them, right? Like they're invaders for trying to get jobs here or something. And like just I was glad it made me, one, like, very aware of other people, and two, glad that I kind of had a place where I could actually kind of talk about Good Friday and celebrate it like as I should have with this group, as opposed to what I would have to do elsewhere, which is I mean, I'm in Mormon country, so it's going to be celebrating it with a bunch of people who really don't embody any of what Good Friday was all about. But yeah. No. Aaron, any thoughts? Ben, any additional thoughts?
Some of the feedback I got, I actually had someone reach out to me. They were very offended by my post. Very offended. And you know what they're offended about? Please make sure you specify that it's American white evangelical Christianity.
Oh, true. Overseas white evangelical Christians on us so kind.
And there, you know what? And he had a point. And I messaged back. I said, you have a very good point. It is absolutely overwhelmingly American white evangelical Christianity. But I got a kick out of that. That person reaching out to me. But so ironically, I still have PTSD issues going to church still. I left, you know, I swore, I mean, I still can't believe I'm happy and enjoying these Bible studies. That shows the growth and the healing that's happened in my life. But so I wasn't planning on going anywhere for Easter. To me, it's just nothing but a big, a lot of pomp and circumstance, but little depth. And in my opinion, and my kids begged me to go, and so we went to a larger church here in the community, and they have it's so big that they actually have an upstairs room where they have a more personal service, and then they have the massive room that can hold, you know, the 5,000 people and the main service. But even on the upstairs room, they had the music so loud that it felt like someone was giving me the Heimlich maneuver. And, you know, to me, it was more of a show and a concert than it was worship. And I ended up finding myself, it really, I felt myself getting physically ill because my spiritual PTSD is sometimes more substantial than I realize. And Sunday, on Easter, I was struggling. I was not doing well at that service. And I couldn't enjoy it because to me it was. I'm like, if I wanted to go to a concert, I would have gone to a concert. I thought this was supposed to be. I don't know. I just don't think Easter's what it's. We've turned into something that it's not supposed to be. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, I completely I get that. I have a terrible analogy for this, but so I'm a big fan, or at least I was a big fan of the Pokemon games, the video
Yeah.
games.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
me too.
they're fantastic in their era and everything like that. I'd still probably play like Gen 3 or Gen 4 if I had the opportunity and a whole bunch of free time or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have been for the last 6 or 7 years or so, longer than that actually, probably closer to a decade, been playing the Pokemon tabletop game. It's D&D meets Pokemon. It's fantastic. Um, and so I've been playing in several campaigns of that, throughout the years. And after having played that, I can't go back to playing Pokemon games because after you have the freedom to do anything that you want, playing a video game about the subject, which is so restrictive, and you have to go along this preset path, and you have to do everything exactly as the game like dictates, and you fight
Yeah.
these enemies in order and everything like that. It completely feels so restrictive. It's like a straitjacket compared to a tabletop game where you can go anywhere and do anything. Um, and so and you can come up with like off the wall solutions like you need to dig a hole. Well, you don't have the move dig, so you're out of luck. Well, no, I mean I could just pull out a shovel and start digging, or whatever, that sort of thing. And my thought process when you were speaking, Ben, about going to church and everything like that is I've been in this community, I've been in Ryan Shaver's community, I've been in other small groups, and after having done that, I can't see myself going back and going to a sermon, like in an actual like a physical church, going to a sermon and listening to a pastor
So
speak.
limiting.
It's so limiting. Like I want to be able to speak to my religious like mentor, I guess is the best way to like. In this case, I feel like you're my mentor, Odie, and Ryan's the great. You grimace at that, but
Yeah.
no, Ryan's like also a mentor of mine, and I consult them, and I have direct one-on-one communication with the people that I'm speaking with that I consider to be far more knowledgeable on theology than I am. And I really value these relationships, but like going to a sermon, and having somebody like speak to thousands of people and receive a one size fits all message, I don't see how I can get any value out of that. And so like I kind of like it to the Pokemon example. Like
Yeah.
I can't go back
see
to
what you're
playing I can't go back to playing a regular Pokemon game after playing the tabletop version. I can't go back to a sermon after being in these small groups. Like it just feels so limiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul talks about the difference between feeding people milk and feeding people steak. Like you just need to be able to feed different people different things. And so the idea that, that there's this very watered down buffet that everybody's supposed to enjoy. You've already gone to the back room where they've got the filet mignon. And then every week though, they're like, well, first start with the buffet. You're like, I don't want to. I'm not going to fill up on this.
Yeah.
Like I'm not.
I ordered surf and turf for a reason, baby.
Yeah, right. Like you just ordered the better thing, and like it's where you're at. Like I'm not against the idea of having these type of sermons, but I 100% understand them. At some point, you're going to graduate beyond them. I mean, literally, the point of them is for them to be generic, right? Like they have to appeal to literally a general, like that word part is in there.
Well, then I guess the follow-up question then that's a little bit more challenging then is if you are content with constantly just getting sermons and never digging any deeper than that, are you stifled on your journey to becoming a better Christian?
Okay, so I'll say no, but I will let Ben answer this one because I find it to be a fascinating question.
I'm like, wow, that's a deep.
Yeah, that's a deep question.
Well, one of my struggles, and I know that I have a lot of spiritual PTSD, a lot of spiritual trauma because of my upbringing. Coming out of literally a religious cult. The Independent Fundamental Baptist is absolutely a cult. There's no other way. I mean, they meet every single criteria on a scale of 1 to 10. They're a 10 on every one of them, and so then I've kind of been in between too. I've been in the Southern Baptist Church, and I discovered there was not a lot of difference actually between the Southern Baptist Church that I was at and the Independent Fundamental Baptist I grew up in. give or take, things they call standards, but it gets down to the core issues. They're literally the same cloth. But the one thing I've wondered is kind of how where we are. Like we can sit here in this Bible study, we're relaxed, um, but we have deep discussions, and everybody is equally appreciated. No question is a stupid question. Um, there's both milk and there's meat being given all at the same time. It's being. I think there's a balance when you have this type of setting, which is I think more of what Jesus and from what I'm getting from the Bible, that the churches are small groups, is what they are, not these
Yeah.
massive auditoriums filled with thousands of people getting a catch all message. That is not church. I mean, there was moments where there was massive preaching, but that was not the norm. The norm was going house to house, just studying God's word, just like what we're doing right here. And the whole church setting that we see has in our culture that goes back quite a few years now, I think is one reason why we're in the condition we are, because it's easy. We've created multi-generational habit of just being mindless robots instead of actually thinking for ourselves. And for some reason, some churches will have Bible study and then they'll still have the general service, and there's there's just like political pressure if you don't go to the Bible study that you're not a good Christian. If you're going to this church, you're not an active member. But then you go to the Bible study is so biased and slanted towards a denominational viewpoint. It's not a Bible study, it's an indoctrinational study. And instead of allowing other viewpoints and discussing them and not putting other um ooh, Bray, I'm on it with you, man. Go Bray. Um, but a lot of the quote unquote Bible studies that we see that are sponsored by churches, they're nothing but a denominational and doctrinational systems setting. They're not actually what I would call a Bible study where you get to have you're not silencing somebody's opinion. You're sharing God's word with each other. You're discussing it. You don't even have to come to a conclusion, because let's face it, our walk with Christ, if we suddenly just come to a conclusion, it's very rare that you do. It's a journey. Um. Anyway, I'm starting to wander again.
You're good. I mean, I feel you. You're allowed to wander. I mean, it's a pretty personal question. I
It's a
think
very personal
my
question.
answer to Aaron's question is no, and it's precisely for this reason. If I were permitted to do nothing with my life, no work, I didn't have to. All my needs taken care of, and I opted to spend the time one-on-one with religious advisors, and I stay indoors and I learn more and more about God, and I just learn and I learn and I learn. And maybe I keep a journal and write to myself, and I get all this direct, talking with people about God. Versus if I don't know who Jesus is, but I go out and live my life and try to take care of people who are hurting, I would say that second person has infinitely more spiritual growth than that first person. I don't see, and I think it's kind of an evasive answer to your question, Aaron, because I do think, of course, you're going to know more if you're able to get like one-on-one time versus if all you do is consume like televangelists or something like that. But I do think there are a number of people that their growth doesn't really go much beyond, oh, Jesus just wants me to be a good person. I'm not gonna like I'm not smart enough to read the Bible. I don't understand the deeper complexities. I feel like it's above me. I have to trust other people to kind of do that studying for me because my life is in pediatric care or something, right? Like, and I'm just going to take care of pediatrics. I think the Bible itself confirms that this person is gone on a deeper spiritual journey than somebody who actually just like reads and asks questions.
Accumulates knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, like accumulation of knowledge. Knowledge is a gift of the spirit. Absolutely. I don't want to put down knowledge. I think it's advantageous to have knowledge. Like, I'm not an anti-intellectualist or anti-expertise or anything like that. But like, I do believe that Jesus did not intend for all of us to be pastors, to spend hundreds of hours. I've mentioned this a couple of times. I'm getting a lot of mileage out of this one, but that verse we read in Proverbs, that's like, you want to learn? Go out in the marketplace, right? Like, go talk to people. If you want to learn about the nature of God, it's not holed up in your room. It's all around you, right? Like, learning from the world around you is as spiritually enlightening as anything else that you can get from this book or experts on that book. It's I think that hands-on effort. So hopefully that answers your question.
But let me add a point to what you just said, Hody.
Sure.
The issue I have is, yes, if pastors were actually doing their jobs, the shepherds, they would be spending their time studying God's word and learning it, and which would take work. But what most pastors do, a majority of them, and I mean a significant majority of them, they just toe the line to the denominational system they're a part of. And so the studying they do is only in conjunction with the denominational teachings rather than broadening their horizons and actually really trying to learn something. All they want to do is just continue the denominational teachings of whatever denomination they're in. So their loyalty is not to Christ and to the word of God. Their loyalty is to their denominational system. And again, as you can tell, I'm very much anti-denominational system because all it's done is just led to disaster that we're in.
Yeah. Spoiler, I right after this, promptly at 8:00, I have to be on another conversation where I'm talking about Paula White and the White House Faith Office.
Yes, I
and
saw
this
that.
This is like the and I just want to say there's something that strikes me as uniquely evil about somebody that we have to put our trust in other people. I've talked about this before, like that Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Yep. Like, as I study the Gospels more and more, I come across something where I'm gaining the work. I mean, the stuff about the trial of Jesus that I talked about. There are anthropologists who uncovered this, who spent 40 plus years of their life, right? Like uncovering this information and then bringing it to me. And then like experts talking about like monetary systems and people are doing all this hard work to bring me the truth, right? And awesome. I am not able to do all of that myself. If I spend 40 years of my life and expertise on one subject, I'm not going to be an expert at anything else. Those people that did the work to bring me the coins aren't going to know everything about Mesopotamia. That's not where they were, right? And so we have to trust the people who did do the work with Mesopotamia and the people who did the work with the coins and all this. We have to trust people with their areas of expertise, right? If we can't, that's worse, right? Like, it's one thing to just be an idiot and spout off what you don't know on the internet, but it's another thing to be the designated expert. The role of like somebody who's a pastor or a Levite, right, as we go through these like Old Testament passages, huge responsibility, because nobody else is getting to study the Bible all the time, right? Because society can't work that way. People can't put these thousands of hours into studying the Bible, right? So we have to trust somebody. So we have to, right? We can't function as a society if everybody individually has to do that work, right? So we have to trust somebody. And so we trust somebody like Paula White, right? Which makes what she does so particularly evil. Now, there's nothing that she says that I can't say that like Ryan Dawson or Daryl Cooper or like Donald Trump, some asshole, right? Like, said, I'm sorry, but like asshole says, right? Like some random, asshole out there. She doesn't say anything too much different than them. But the problem is that she says she's the theological expert and people have to put their trust in it because we can't all do this work. And they end up putting their trust in somebody like that. And it just uniquely squeezes me, man.
She's like the number one person that taught Trump all about 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
remember the saying that is that if you did that expert, you're not an expert until you've done at least 10,000 hours in
sure.
something.
Yeah.
And here's the question that I have asked since I was literally a teenage boy. I remember asking this.
Hmm.
Well, what if you did 10,000 hours wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
My father.
Yeah.
I probably played 10,000 hours of Civ 5, and I'm not very good at
There we go.
it.
My father has 50 years of preaching under his belt.
Yeah.
50 years.
Yeah.
People brag about how my father's this incredible man. But actually, my father is a monster. And there's a whole side of him that a lot of people don't know about. But a lot of my father's teachings, what he taught and what he practiced were two different things, for one, two different worlds. But a lot of his teachings that he teaches to this hour, to this very day, are incredibly wrong and actually have led towards horrible abusive situations. So we're talking 50 years of preaching the wrong thing over and over and over again, to the point that he doesn't even have to open his Bible. He can just preach the same message. He would preach the same sermon over and over again so much. I used to go on the road with my dad because my mom couldn't control me. So she sent me on the road with my dad. I actually had my father's messages memorized. And I could be sitting there daydreaming, messing around, writing in my writing notes or something, messing around, and my dad would say, "Oh, where was I? Hey, Benjamin, where was I?" And I, without even blinking, I could tell him exactly where he was in his message and help him start back up again. But my point is, it was wrong and still is wrong. So who do we trust?
I mean, this is why I think the Bible is so kinetic. Like, I think that it teaches, like, by their works you shall know them, because
Yeah.
not all of us can challenge their ideas, but I can't, right? Like, somebody smarter than me is out there being a total charlatan right now. Somebody smarter than me with more hours invested this is leading people astray right now. So what qualifies for me to say they're leading them astray? Because we live in a world where a lot of people are like, well, they've got 50 years under their belt. You're just, you're not even 50 years old, right? You kind of had a whole faithful rediscovering within like the last 5 to 10 years. Like, why should I trust you, you newbie? And the only thing I can do is say, by their works, you shall know them. What are their fruits? What is the fruit? Well, singular fruit. Do they have the fruit of the Spirit? And they don't. And that is how the common man can challenge what it is, right? Like,
Fruit of the Spirit. It goes. I'm telling you, it goes back to that every single time.
Yep.
Every time.
Because you can't. A good tree can't have bad fruit. Bad tree can't have good fruit. It's just not like we are guaranteed that. So you know what? If somebody wants to call me a monster for saying that this like gay atheist who's just doing his best to love his neighbor or whatever and ends up producing all this good fruit, they're going to hell, but meanwhile Paula White's going to heaven because she said the magic words. Take it up with God, right? Like, I've got the scriptures that tell you about the fruit, and that's the way that I am told that I can judge people. I'm not to judge their hearts. I'm explicitly told not to do that. So all I'm to do is to judge their fruit. What are their results?
That's a good challenge, though. You're right. We got to judge their fruit, and not make it personal.
Yeah,
it's
and I'm going to
do that.
Especially when we're talking about Paula White. I'm going to be very careful here. Fruit is not money. Okay, fruit of the Spirit isn't promise of a lifelong of health. It's not longevity and all the other crap that Paula White promises that you'll get if you'll give her $1,000.
Well, just so ironically, the whole group of the whole Christian world that I grew up in, they wouldn't even consider one thing that came out of Paula White's mouth because she's a female.
Yeah.
Even though they're pro-Trumpers.
Yep.
I mean, and I'll guarantee you, every single one of them voted for Trump, but they will have nothing to do with Paula White just because she's a female. They won't even listen. They wouldn't even consider a word to come out of her mouth.
Leopard's eating faces quite a bit on this one.
Yeah. I just get a kick out of it at this point.
I did want to bring in at least one more that from the readings this week. I brought up your Good Friday post because I wanted to talk about this one. It's Saturday, and unfortunately Saturday is often called like Silent Saturday, which I hate. It really should not be, because we've got this great, you've got Palm Sunday, Holy Monday, Fig Tuesday, Spy Wednesday. You've got all what's it? I think I can do all of them. It's Good Supper Thursday, or Last Supper Thursday, Good Friday, Silent Saturday, Easter Sunday, right? So you got those 8 days, and all of them get these cool names except for Saturday, which is just silent. And it's a real betrayal, because something very significant happens in the gospel on that, and something that is very much downplayed by the modern Christian church, by the revisionists, and it really shouldn't be. So I'm going to read another post that I read. I almost want one of you to read it so that way it sounds smarter, but here it goes. And that is Happy Harrowing of Hell Day. It's a shame that Easter week... It's a shame that Easter week has so many notable days, and yet Saturday is commonly referred to as Silent Saturday today, when something totally awesome happened. Outside of being the most metal holiday name ever, the Harrowing of Hell is an event where Christ descended into hell. And I cite passages on all these, so I won't read those, but after his death, and liberated the souls there. Harrowing means acutely distressing and painful. Indeed, this is the moment that the forces of the devil realized that even those who had died and went to hell were no longer under their control to torture for eternity. The Bible is clear that nothing we fallen mortals can do will ever get us access to heaven. But through the power of Christ, even the journey to heaven is possible, despite our human nature. Harrowing of Hell Day is a day to proclaim total victory over Satan, that even those who he has imprisoned will be released. It is only a matter of time until we will all be saved and united with God again. And then I'm going to end with a Bible verse where we quote the first part and not the last part very much, but here it is. That at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It's a big one, and for me, Bray, to the harrowing. Yes, thank you. I'm glad we got to celebrate that together. Bray says the entire point of the sheep and the goats and the sheep is, but I said the name, and the I say his name is still an excuse for bad behavior. Yeah, the I said his name people go to hell in the example of the sheep and the goats, by the way. So obviously this is very universalist, right? Like very like all people go to heaven eventually, right? After a brief time in hell. I just think it's so sad that one of in fact, I'll go ahead and say it. The single biggest pushback I get when I bring this up is people will be like, well, then why would they even believe in Christianity then? Why? Right? Like without that coercion, these people don't know how to make converts. Right? They have no idea the appeal of Christ without the idea of hell, hanging hell over somebody's head, despite it being mentioned so rarely. And the times that it mentions, they have to borrow it from other religions. They call it like Hades or Sheol, right? They borrow it from these other Near East religions. They borrow it from Greek mythology or something. And those are the only instances we even have that it even so much as it exists, right? And so, like, hell is so secondary to Christ's message. It's the good news, right? Not the bad news. And yet we feel that without being like, oh, the narrow way, most of you aren't going to get there right off the bat, is the only way that we can like scare people into believing it. And honestly, people who are scared and believe in the gospel are a detriment to the gospel itself. They're a burden to Christianity to see these people who believe out of fear. There's not insight there. There's not love there. There's fear. There's worry. There's regret. There's shame. Like that's not the good news, right?
Turning
like,
God into like a Rocco's basilisk or whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I read it basically my thoughts. But any thoughts you guys have?
It is absolutely a fear-based majority of evangelical Christianity, and from what I have observed, is a fear-based system. Which I'm like, as I've been deconstructing, and now I would say I'm probably more reconstructing in this point in my life, I'm like, I'm just not seeing this whole fear-based system. And in fact, this is kind of a segue, but I'm in a journey in my therapy. I've been going to therapy weeklies for almost 5 years now. It took a while to get through some stuff. amazing. Bray knows what I'm talking about. It's amazing what happens when you have significant childhood trauma. It when it finally catches up to you, catches up to your heart. But there was a point in my and part of my reconstructing, I'm finding something interesting. I'm starting to be I am becoming more and more and more and more a universalist in my I mean, I just that's what I see. I see that all will come to the knowledge of who Jesus is, and every knee will bow, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Well, to me, that means everybody's going to heaven. Well, there was a problem with that. It conflicted with my anger to my abusers. I want my abusers that did stuff to me, both sexually and physically, I want them to rot in hell, man. So now I have a conflict because I'm like, well, wait a minute. They're not gonna rot in hell because they're gonna be saved. So I have a choice. I can either forgive them, knowing that the forgiveness is for me and between me and God alone, and learn to actually see them as a human being, or I can continue to hate them and wish them to go to hell, but that's not going to do anything 'cause you're going to get saved anyway. I don't know if I'm making sense how I'm explaining this. So it's been an
Yeah.
interesting conflict in my heart because I actually have enjoyed um the evangelical Christianity side of things on terms of hell because it fed my bitterness and my anger. And the more I've deconstructed away from most of evangelical Christianity, it's actually helped remove my in my journey of healing. It's really helped remove a lot of my hate, and I have found my hate being replaced with um a sadness for my abusers, realizing that because most people who are abusers actually, they were more than likely abused themselves. The statistics are there. It's just, I mean, yes, there's horrible narcissists who, sociopaths that have made a choice, but even then, sociopaths are not born. They're made. They're made, not born. Say that right. And so it's just when you're talking about and then to go back to the harrowing day. What did you call what do you call it? Saturday
Oh, Silent Saturday is what it's supposed to be called,
where
but
Jesus goes.
Harrowing of Hell Day is what
Okay.
I called it.
So
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you guys are talking about, I've never heard of my entire life. Because the groups that I grew up in, they always taught that Jesus went down and he only spoke to the Old Testament Christian saints. That's how it was taught. And I'm like, well, how do we know who the Old Testament Christian saints are? Is it just, you know, the ones in the Bible that are talked about? Or how do we know? And I would ask questions like that. Well, it's just the Old Testament saints. Well, who are the Old Testament saints? Well, it's the Old Testament saints. You just go around and around. And I never did get answers to these questions. And all of a sudden, I'm being introduced to this whole harrowing of health stuff. And I'm like, what? It is blowing my mind. I'll just be honest with you, it's blowing my mind, but it's clicking, it's adding things into my reconstructing that it's actually starting to click. And it again is even more connecting to that I have become a complete universalist.
I'm
There's
analogizing it to you're trying your entire life through the religious education that you've been taught to
yeah,
assemble a 1,000-piece puzzle with only like 400 pieces. And these groups are like giving you more and more pieces every single day
yes.
and giving you the ability to construct the rest of the puzzle that was already there.
And it's cool when you start getting more pieces and you're like, oh my goodness, that makes total sense to me now.
Yeah.
What does Bray say?
Oh, did Bray
Yeah,
make
he
a
commented.
comment
I
here?
love his
Okay.
comment.
Saturday of Light. So they'll have chance after chance to get it right. As much as they broke me, I hope they eventually meet me again, redeemed through their own harrowings. It feels counterintuitive, but I want to see my worst enemies again as siblings in due time. So I guess,
I just understood what he did. That was powerful.
yeah.
Wow.
And not to, I hate hijacking this because obviously, hang on, I dropped something. There we go. Not to take away from it because obviously you and Bray have extreme. My enemies in my life said something mean about my hairline in middle school. right? You guys are dealing with something. You guys are dealing with something a bit more severe than that, right?
Versus being hung upside down by a rope and beaten and then sodomized with batons. You know, there's a little
Yes,
bit of a difference
right,
there.
slight, right? Just you win if that's the content. But when I'm reading about, so when I was actually researching most of these mega church leaders and that kind of their scandals, there's this. I got it. I went down the rabbit hole on there on a lot of these guys and looking into their scandals. Bray is noting, yeah, it's a little bit different. Almost all of them suffered abuse as children. And it's kind of like when you look at serial killers and you just say, oh, well, which of the serial killers weren't broken kids? Didn't have some seriously mental problem. They were fine mentally. They didn't have any bullies. They weren't assaulted. Nobody made them feel bad about themselves. How many? Right? You look at these massive dictators throughout history, terrible, horrible, awful people. You know, how many of them didn't suffer? I'm just off the top of my head thinking about some of the worst ones: mental problems, abuse, sexual abuse, disfigurement, manipulation, a lot of them or whatever. Paula White, sexually assaulted at 6 years old. Parents had the police called him. Dad beat the mom for not letting go of the kids. Dad goes to prison. Dad killed himself because he could, like, the first day out of prison, he killed himself because he said he like just wanted to see the kids or whatever. And she related to like her dad. Like Paula White's story, I mean, eating disorder. You know, obviously because of what happened to her, she was promiscuous at a young age and everything, right? Like, yeah. She was a tormented person. And so when I see these people that are largely tormentors, I want Paula White's salvation? Yes, but like you mentioned, Ben, why do I want this? I certainly don't want her salvation because she's super cool, right? I don't want her salvation because like all the people who she's misled and misguided and, I mean, straight up stolen from, right? Like, I mean, obviously, I'll go into after this. I have I'll be on Twitter and
absolute thief and a con artist.
Right. All that stuff is bad, and so obviously, I can see why do all those people they deserve some justice.
She needs to launch a Bible crypto coin.
Don't give her any ideas. Don't
tempt her.
Bible coin.
But ultimately, like, it's not for those reasons that I want her redeemed. Her redemption starts with a sexually abused 6-year-old girl. You know, it starts with the parents that, I mean, the police report had the mom literally pulling on her one hand and her dad pulling on her other arm, like literally tearing her apart. You know, she deserves that healing. And if she has that healing, is she the same Paula White we know? Is Ted Bundy, without his childhood, the same Ted Bundy we know? Is Stalin or Hitler the same people that we know? If they receive that healing from the torment they endured when they were children? Obviously, the people deserve justice, but justice isn't achieved through vengeance. Justice for you, Ben and Bray, isn't achieved through your tormentors spending a lifetime in hell. Justice is achieved through way different means, right? Like through your forgiveness of them is the beginning of your ability to receive that justice in whatever capacity it may look like. You know, that's something we as Christians, we should be, I mean, I never want to just be like, oh yeah, let it go. Let everybody go scot-free. Of course not. Right? Like justice is it's a strong virtue, and it's sad that it gets opposed to mercy. One of the Bible verses that unfortunately we just won't have time for, but it's one that I noted in Proverbs that talked about basically the virtues have a big orgy with each other. And that might sound like me exaggerating, but like quite literally, they're talking about how like truth and righteousness, like knowing each other and intentionally using a sexual word for know, and then like righteousness and joy kissing, right? Like there's this section that talks about that, and all this is supposed to be part of it, right? So I don't want to rob anybody of their justice. If Paula White goes on a redemption process, that's going to involve a lot of what she has to do to make it up to her tormentors, right? Like Ben, if whoever goes on their repentance journey for you, be it in this life or the next life, they're going to have to do a great deal to make it up to you. But that's still important, right? Like that's not something that we're just setting aside. You know, you are going to get someday, if these people are indeed saved, you are going to get the admittance, the recognition of the harm that those people did, the knowledge of their harm, and they will be like, would you forgive me? And you will say yes, right? Now, all you can do, Ben, for now, because you don't have that yet, is forgive them right now. You know, but ultimately, in the end, that's where we're going to go.
Forgiveness is a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, I am literally just after all of this work and thousands of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of working through this, I can tell you that my forgiveness has just started. I mean, it's an honest statement. I'm very open about it. I don't hate them anymore. I don't want them dead anymore. But have I forgiven them? I don't know if I have yet. But it's where it started with. I realized it's literally in the last year, in 2024 is when it started. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't hate them anymore. And it was an incredible moment of healing for me to realize I don't have that hate harboring in me anymore. It was a huge moment of my journey. But to say I've forgiven them, I don't know. I think it's a process.
All these are processes, right?
Yeah.
You know, righteousness is a way of life. It's not a moment in time. You know, it's So yeah, Aaron, any thoughts about that, or and anything else that you want to bring up?
Yeah, no, I don't have any more thoughts. Although we've only got a half hour left, and we got 2 weeks of current events to talk about. So
yeah, let's go ahead and get on that. So I have one in specific. I think it will be very. I think it will be very quick. About RFK Jr. and what he said about autistic people.
Oh my word, that's horrible what he said.
And it's about as bad as it gets. I'm going to go ahead and share this, and with the knowledge that it's only 43 seconds, but I like showing people this because a lot of people are like, you're taking him out of context or something like that. Right. I'm going to play the entire thing right now.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted.
So that's what Genius RFK, that's our Health and Human Services Director, has to say about autistic people. So I think I can make this pretty short. I just won't read all the data. But frankly, I guess I'll start by saying, one, the biggest problem I have with this, and Big John and I do the free-for-all on Thursday evenings with him. And his son is lightly verbal, but severely autistic. Will need lifelong care. Big John will never go on a vacation for his life, the rest of his life because of this. The idea, though, that autistic people destroy their families and are themselves destroyed is maybe one of the most evil way to say that. Yeah. Now, I'll get into the eugenics bit in a bit because that has to do with kind of why he's lying and what we're talking about here. But, and I want to also acknowledge, and this is important, especially since we've got Bray here too, and I know he has some personal experience for this. Listen, I understand the pressure this puts on you when you have like I said, I know somebody whose son is like this, and their marriage is together, but it's full of challenges, right? There's unique challenges to this. Even light autism has challenges, right? Even people who don't realize they're autistic until they're in like their 40s, right? When they get diagnosed, find out they are, it helps to have that diagnosis, because then you say, oh, these are challenges I've always experienced, and now I know how to like confront those better. Versus some people who have a severe, a higher rated case of autism, and they are as, disabled as what RFK Jr. is describing here. The problem is, is even the ones that we consider, that we would even consider at all mentally impaired, represent less than 4 in 10 of autistic people. And unfortunately, RFK Jr. says what he says and then clarifies many of them won't be able to use the bathroom by themselves. So that means all of them were the first case, not able to pay taxes, not able to go on dates, not able to do poetry. Now, assuming that he just forgot to say the word, now even if you got to say the word most, he's still wrong. Like I said, only 4 in 10 are considered to have a mental impairment. It's actually less than that, and that number is shrinking as we discover more people with autism, right? So, which makes sense, right? We just find out more people who were undiagnosed before, and they were undiagnosed because they didn't have an impairment. Compare that to in the 80s, for example, 69% had a mental impairment, obviously it was still probably closer to, the 4 in 10 now or whatever. But, because we only brought it up when we found, hey, they seem mentally impaired. Oh, they have autism, right? Now we're getting people tested who don't. But I want, I know it sounds crazy, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. The problem is I can't. And the reason being is because here he goes from just like, people could say, oh, he's misspeaking, he's whatever. He's actually telling a very genuine lie. And I want to be very surgically precise about this. There is no environmental factor that is happening to these kids at 2 years old that regresses them to that level when they are 4 years old. There are some who get additional detection when they are 4 years. The study that he's citing, in fact, he cites it very specifically within the speech, that the jump goes from 1 in 36 to 1 in 31. The study that he is citing specifically tells you what the differences are, but actually says hey, the ones diagnosed at 2 years old that we recognize impaired, we actually have less people impaired when they hit 4 years old, because the deal is usually if you have that pretty severe impairment, it's going to be somewhat obvious, right? Pretty quick. And so this environmental factor that goes between the 2 and 4 years old, when the rates are actually flat, is completely fabricated. Total lie. Not consistent. We have the data. It's one thing for me to say I don't know what data he's working with. He's told me the data he has. You can study it for yourself. It's the CDC, autism data. It's 2024's data, and you can look at that and they go back and compare. And then the study actually mostly deals with 8 years old. An 8-year-old is actually where we see more of a climb, but the climb is actually more diagnosis. For example, the rates of autism among white people stayed the same. The rates of autism among Black people and Hispanic people, oddly enough, 2 of the minorities that got the fewest vaccines within their group, actually increased. The study itself says, and I would bore you reading this, but I will say paragraph after paragraph after paragraph simply explains, yes, our sites are actually testing more Black people and Hispanic people for this as more of them gain access to coverage. So historically underserved communities are actually getting more coverage. And so back in 2022, again, this is data we have, explains when it's only 1 in 36, we're testing more people. So we expect to see a jump in the next year's stats, because these entire communities that aren't being tested at all, and we're just passing them all off as non-autistic, probably have the same rates of autism as white people and Asian people, right? They're just not as affluent. And so as we do more experiments on them, of course, they're not getting, and it's experiment to be sure, right? But as we do more testing on them, we will find that, yes, they have the same rates of autism as everybody else. They just don't get diagnosed as often. So these are flat out lies. It's within the data himself. And Mr. heroin, brainworm, RFK, the person who he has placed in charge of examining why this happened is some guy named David Greer.
Literally a nobody.
Right? Like
Yeah.
this is somebody who has had his license revoked in all 50 states for practicing with a false license. He has forged signatures before to say he's a medical professional when he's not. And he is signed literally for these kids with autism. And I am not kidding you, a drug called Lupron. It is the exact same drug, not like maybe similar, something like that. It is the exact same drug we give to chemically castrate sex offenders. So for all that virtue signaling about hating on trans people because, oh, you're castrating children, right? Like, you know, whatever, before they can consent. This guy literally did this. 2-year-olds and 4-year-old, 8-year-old kids. His father, Mark, is it Geyer? Actually, I think I'm adding an R when I shouldn't be. I think it's Geier. Yeah, I am adding. I'm sorry. So yeah, it's David Geyer, not Grier. My bad. But yeah, this guy and his dad, Mark, are charlatans of the highest order. They are verifiably false. These environmental factors are completely fabricated. Environmental factors can happen. I want to be clear about that. But this is you know, when people are growing up, our brains don't finish developing till we're like 25, 28, right? So technically you could develop autism at like 26 years old, right? It happens during neurological development. Now the reason it's mostly genetic is because where is it your brain develops the most? In the womb, of course, right? So before you're born, right? You'll still do a lot more as you get older. So all of that makes sense that at any time you could develop it. What is the environmental factor? I'm telling you straight up now, hate vaccines if you want. There is no link there. The studies are done. They've been done. They've been done. They've been done again and again and again. There is no evidence for that. And so even if you think it's environmental, you got to find something else. And this guy is like, it would be the equivalent of putting like a hippie who is very anti like nuke in front of examining if we should go look into nuclear energy, right? Like it is very patently obvious what he's trying to do. And this is RFK. This is the same guy who doesn't know what riboflavin is. He didn't know how to pronounce it. And he doesn't know that it's vitamin B2. He listed it as one of those scary ingredients that we need to ban. This is a guy who said like, when I grew up, but we didn't have anybody with ADD or ADHD. Yes, you did. Right? Like they just went big no.
There's evidence of autism, by the way. There are stories of, you know, they were just sent to mental hospitals back in the 1700s, 1800s. And they're realizing, what if these kids that were just shipped off that were nonverbal and stuff, or had these struggles and issues, they were just shipped off to mental institutes because no one knew how to help, or they didn't have the science to help them.
Yeah.
I mean, they had feral children. It makes you wonder if those kids were just autistic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people wonder it with the Kennedys, right? They had a family member lobotomized, and people are just wondering, like, is this why he's so, like, these people, like, trying to, like, assuage his own guilt of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, the kind of thing. So, and I will address, as I said, Aaron's point here. The only way you're getting rid of it, as he has suggested, is eugenics. Now, I don't believe he is actually going to commit eugenics. Maybe I'm giving him too much leeway here, but right. Look, I think he's going after vaccines. I think that obviously that's where his crony money is, right? If you're not vaccinated for certain diseases, you're going to get certain diseases. Those diseases will have to be treated with certain treatments. And those people pay a lot of money to people like RFK Jr. because they know that the less people that get vaccinated will end up getting diseases that require their treatments, right? So I believe he's just being crony about all this, right? Like he's got corporate backing, and that's what he's trying to do. But to be very clear, if you say you want to cure autism or eliminate it, you would have to commit eugenics to do it. Brain notes here, autism spectrum disorder is a genetic disorder, and eliminating it is eugenics. ALD is a separate disorder caused by environmental factors, and we should ask what factors cause them. Sure. At no point should we hate people for what they were born or forced to be, but we should also acknowledge the struggle of having or assisting a person with ASD, ALD. So the biggest like pushback I had is people being like, what? Some of them are really hard to take care of. Yeah, sure. Right? Like fully acknowledged. Nobody is saying it's super easy. He's the one saying they're all difficult. I'm the one saying that doesn't have to be that way. Aaron and Ben, your thoughts on this one?
Well, and I would like to see a society that we could live in where the people who are difficult to take care of are taken care of by the community in a way that doesn't put all of the burden on the individual parents, to the point where it monopolizes their entire life, like, and have a society that's compassionate enough to want to do that. Because right now we live these hyper individualized, atomized lives, and our neighbors have low functioning autistic kids, and we're like, wow, that really sucks for you. And
Yeah.
it,
That's an amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
So I was just reading this just this evening. Opinion Today put it out. 4 in 10 Republicans believe that the COVID-19 vaccine is the deadliest vaccine ever created. 3 in 10 Republicans believe that more people have died from the vaccine than from the COVID-19 itself.
I believe that.
That blew me away.
Yeah.
3 in 10 believe more people died from the vaccine than from COVID.
And Republicans. I don't know if
that's unreal.
that's just unreal. I mean, as a guy that's disabled because of long COVID, and actually when I got the vaccine, it actually improved me. Now I know some people did have bad effects, and there is those who will pay the price that they are gonna, but overall statistically, and that the vaccines helped more people than hurt.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. I mean, measles there it is. You found it. Measles was eradicated, for crying out loud.
Every vaccine has adverse side effects.
Yeah.
Every single one of them does. My dad is a living example of an adverse side effect from vaccines, and I'm incredibly still pro-vaccine, even considering that, because statistically it's incredibly rare. But no, my dad worked for the Houston Fire Department, and as part of the fire department's program and everything like that for keeping firefighters healthy, they administered yearly flu vaccines. But it's just a regular flu vaccine that happened at the time, and my dad took it just like all the other firefighters at the department, and he was just the unlucky one that happened to draw the bad batch of the fact that the vaccines were handled, they traveled to their destination handled properly, but the people administering the vaccine at the fire department are not, they're trained medical professionals in the same way that EMS is a trained medical professional, but they're not like virologists or immunologists or anything like that. They're just regular medical professionals, and they weren't storing the vaccine at the proper temperature that it needed to be held at.
I was thinking, I was just wondering, it wasn't stored right, was it?
It wasn't stored properly. And so as a process of that, it failed to do what it was supposed to do correctly. And my dad ended up getting the brunt of it. He developed a disease called Guillain-Barré. If you've ever heard of that, which
I have.
It paralyzes you from head to toe. And a lot of people die because their lungs stop functioning. And that's usually how most people die, is that their lungs stop functioning, and then they end up just dying of lack of oxygen.
So your dad's alive but paralyzed?
Yeah. So he managed to get to the hospital quick enough, like not quick enough to, like a lot of people that get Guillain-Barré, if they get to the hospital quick enough, they can actually be run through dialysis quick enough that they end up not having negative effects.
So that wasn't the vaccine, though. That was human error.
Yeah, no, it was just human error.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is, it's not even all. First of all, adverse effects from the vaccine are also like incredibly rare from the get-go. But then on top of that, you add in how many were from the actual vaccine versus the human error of administering the vaccine, and the number shrinks even more. Like if you can control for human error, then it's even less of a chance. So like statistically, my dad was just an incredibly unfortunate anomaly, and
the things that Kennedy said, I know that he's trying to use them to eliminate vaccines. Now, have we possibly gone vaccine crazy? Maybe we have, but there's certain vaccines like, the measles vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine. There's vaccines that have literally helped society in such mind-boggling ways.
The idea to me that we've gone vaccine crazy in any context other than people are crazy about the effectiveness of vaccines, being so
Well,
good.
I did see the list one time of vaccines, and it's like, you have
There's a lot of diseases,
there's a lot of diseases, but do I trust the drug companies, to be honest? And the answer is no, because
Sure.
they don't have a history of being honest. So
Right.
that's where there has to be a balance. And again, it goes down to the same word, moderation. But the and I'm pro-vax. I mean, I literally grew up in an anti-vaccine, world. I mean, my oldest brother, he didn't even get Social Security numbers for his kids for years, so that way he could keep them unvaccinated. Literally, that's
Jeez.
how nuts he was. Until he started realizing how much money he was leaving out on the table with tax returns. Because he had like what 10, 12 kids, whatever it is, and but um oh, what was I gonna say? I just had one of those brain zaps. Oh, I hate those brain zaps. But
You're good. You're good.
but what with the thing that scares me with what Kennedy said, that is, and you guys are using the word eugenics. It's he's opening the door that we should never open, and it's the door of, I guess the word would be eugenics. But it's he's this is the kind of stuff we heard Hitler talk like. And what did he do? I mean, people that were autistic or people that were Down syndrome, I mean, they were eliminated. It didn't matter if they were Germans or not. They were eliminated. And what we have discovered is that some of the most amazing people in society are autistic children. There's some of the smartest kids. Yes, there's the nonverbal ones and things, but some of the most incredible minds that we have discovered are ones that have certain disabilities. Um, I mean, not to say it's the best example, but Asperger's syndrome. Elon Musk has Asperger's, and the guy is a genius. But he does lack. I think he lacks conscious. What's the word? He lacks people skills substantially, but the guy's a genius, and and you wonder.
Debatable.
I know what you mean, but he really is a smart guy. I mean, but he's gone to an extreme that's dangerous. Because he's been left unchecked, and he didn't have the right checks and balances in his life with people that helped him and guided him along. But some of the most amazing people I guess I've met in my life. Look at Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was a genius,
Mhm.
but he was a lot like Elon Musk. In other words, he was debatable. I mean, you read some of this. Thomas Edison was pumped up to be like this incredible hero, but the truth be told, the real hero was his competitor,
Tesla.
Tesla.
Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, and he was this genius guy that he didn't care if he tortured people to get what he wanted. Like with the electric chair. He was not a good guy, but yet he was a brilliant man. And I swear to this day, everything you described about him with his childhood, he was autistic. Read how people describe a child that are of now, and then read back how he was described. And I'm telling you, they talk about how he had two flies flying in his head. He was autistic. That's exactly what he was.
It's funny listening. I was reading this book about history and how they try to describe people that they didn't know what to call it back then, right? We know like what it is now, right? But like these people that have depression, and they just were like, he just like, and they're just right about it, and they're just like, it's just a long sad that I can't. I don't know what it is, and it's like,
I evangelize it every single time the topic of depression and history comes up.
Yeah.
Is the video game Enderal has a major side quest in talking about how medieval people would describe depression and like what they would go about.
It's always been there.
Yeah, it's always been there, and like
Always
how they would come to terms with the clinical, like the issues that follow depression and how they would describe it and all that kind of stuff. It's absolutely fascinating.
And if you don't believe that, just read the book of Psalms.
Yeah.
You'll discover someone that had clinical depression.
Aaron, I left very little time for you to do a current event, but would you like to do one?
Yeah,
5 minutes,
I was gonna say I've got 5 minutes, but I want to talk about Pope Francis.
Oh, okay,
And-
yeah.
Okay.
and how like we didn't properly appreciate him when we had him, and now that we've lost him, I'm severely concerned that we're going to get somebody far worse in his position, and it's going to do a whole lot of harm for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm not a Catholic by any means, and I generally have a fairly negative opinion of Catholicism,
Same
but
here.
but he was a good guy. Like,
He really was.
yeah.
He had a heart for people. He was exactly what I want to be. He was pro humanity.
I mean, it was hard for me, and despite the fact that I have no great love for Catholicism, it was still a really good person.
Well, I
And
personally view the Catholicism as a cult. I mean, and it's one of the most deadly religions throughout history that's claimed more lives than the only other you've got communism, Nazism, and Catholicism are the top claimers of lives throughout history. Because think about that.
Yeah, I got a quote here from it says, "We must restore hope to young people, help the old, be open to the future, spread love, be poor among the poor. We need to include the excluded and preach peace."
Wow.
there was
One of the
there was a side by side
Yeah.
pair of photos on be poor among the poor. There was a side by side photo of the place where Pope Francis rested his head each evening that he was living at his personal home.
uh-huh.
And it was a tiny little twin-sized bed that was like really, really modest. And then it's the side-by-side photo is here's where Joel Osteen rests his head, and it was a photo of his mansion, like his complex, like. And meanwhile, Pope Francis was basically just like a barracks house, like it was very much so like the style of slightly better than a style of bed that you would have as like a military barracks.
Yeah. It's the funny thing is when I read about Pope Francis, like really, I mean, he could have done better about investigating, a lot of the molestation. I know that's been among his critics, that's probably the one that sticks with me is the most legitimate. He didn't.
It's legitimate. It is.
He didn't open that up as much as we all wish that he would have, of course. But compared to what we had, like Benedict right before him, and like you just hope, that they continue to go in this direction. Somebody who says, let us never forget that authentic power is service. We've been reading, Aaron, I know a lot of the parts that you and I get most queasy about the Bible is stuff where Jesus or God is trying to pull people in the right direction slowly but surely, and Francis was, I think, undisputably a pull in the right direction, perfect. We argue about perfection all day, of course not, but like this was much better than what they had been. It would be very easy to just see a MAGA Catholic Church right now, and probably the only reason that it's evangelicals and not just all Christians in general is probably because of people like Francis holding down Catholics and still providing a good amount of not selling out to Trump. To think about how that changed the world. Anybody else? Anything? Last things you want to say before we get out of here? I got to split.
Good.
Yeah, you got to split like in a minute, so you got to go.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining me, Aaron. Ben, I love talking with you as always. Thank you so much. I know I talked a lot on this one.
It was a good night. It was a really good night.
It was a good night.
Yeah. We'll talk more, Aaron. I'll see you tomorrow at book club. But yeah, we'll have a shorter, be a little more focused next week. Thanks everybody who joined us. I'm sorry we got like a ton of viewers within the last 15 minutes. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. We look forward to talking to you all later. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.